Chapter 9. The TV studio. You know, timber is kind of pretty, Zell was saying as he looked around the quiet city. I like the overall color scheme. Very calming. Very blue. Squall wasn't sure what that meant, but Rinoa was giggling, so it must mean something. Shall we start at Timber Maniacs then? Squall asked her for approval calmly. We have nowhere else to start, she shrugged, but frowned. Don't you want to rest a while though? No. Why would I? Your ribs are fine. But if it gets too bad, I'll let you know. For now, I'm fine. I'm only walking. And I've fought with worse. Seed training must be tough, she frowned. He shrugged. If it were easy, everyone would do it. Isn't that what they say? Which way to the Timber Maniacs building? This way, she pointed. The two of them stayed back though, clearly waiting for her to take charge, which she did without complaint. She was used to it from dealing with Zone and Watts. Zell looked like a normal guy, especially when his gauntlets were in his pockets. Rinoa was a common face in the area now. Neither of them would draw even a curious glance. Squall was the one of the three that looked menacing. The gun blade at his hip only made his image more menacing. The black leather, the sharp, cutting eyes, the scar. It was the first time Rinoa had ever walked down the streets of Timber without being mobbed by people eager to talk to her. Most especially the men. She was a little too popular, honestly. Men of all kinds, and a few women besides, had tried to preposition her in the past, even with Zone or Watts or both by her side. With Squall standing there though, people were actively avoiding looking at her. Even if his movements were stiff with pain, which she still couldn't tell, he still stalked dangerously. Like a predator let loose from its cage, he crept forward. His eyes, calm though they were cold and dangerous. Even the air around him shivered. Rinoa knew now that it was because of Shiva. She didn't like the heat, Squall had explained, so she kept it cool. Still, it was rather disconcerting to feel as an ordinary person. And, at the same time, Rinoa didn't really mind. She always seemed to feel too hot naturally. Walking beside Squall with his constantly cool air was pretty comfortable. People crossed the street to get away from Squall though. He looked like a mercenary. If she hadn't known he was Seed, she might suspect that he beat people up for money anyway. Without all the militaristic veneer and discipline of Seed. If Zell noticed, he didn't appear bothered. Squall was probably used to it. Rinoa felt strangely like she was trapped in a plastic bubble with how few people tried to speak with her now. A downside though was that his presence made them more obvious. They were a prime target for Galbadian soldiers to come question. Twice, they had to duck into an alleyway to avoid being seen by patrolling G-Army goons. And they weren't even that far from the trademark building. This is so exhausting, Rinoa let out a breath as they emerged from an alley yet again. She's right, Squall nodded. It's probably better if I leave, I'm too conspicuous. What? She pulled to a stop and turned, her eyes wide. You do kind of stand out, Zell agreed happily enough. I think it's the scar. Very noticeable. You have a point. I think I'll split from you two here and make my own way. Okay, wait. Rinoa grabbed their arms to keep either man from moving. First of all, it's not the scar. Trust me. Secondly, we're not splitting up again. Squall, you're hurt.
You can barely take in a deep breath, much less fight. Isn't that why you brought Zell with us? Because he's better able to protect both of us than Selfie. No, I brought him because he's better able to protect you. I can only protect myself right now. He doesn't need to protect me, I'm fine.
Well, it was partially true.
No, you're not fine. And you're not leaving, that's an order. As you wish.
He nodded once and continued walking. Zell was right with him. Wait. What? It was that easy? Rinoa hastened to catch up with them, looking between the two. Squall had been all for leaving just a moment ago, but she says order and then, poof. He doesn't want to anymore? She had heard, of course, that Seed was obedient. She didn't think she realized just how much so. Despite Squall's obviously menacing aura, they reached the trademark building without issue. Even if it took twice as long because they had to keep ducking out of sight. Timber Maniacs was the only form of media that the Galbadian government allowed Timber to keep after its takeover. However, they operated under strict guidelines about what they could or could not write. It wasn't so much freedom of the press as it was forced praise. Everyone knew it, too. Despite that though, Timber Maniacs continued to run with a certain amount of timber pride. They printed articles that were pre-approved or forced to write, but there was still a sense of independence and resistance in the magazine. It was a thin line to walk to achieve such an affect. Squall was rather impressed. Even if the building that served as such a paper space was cramped, cluttered, and crowded.
Welcome to Timber Maniacs.
The bright-faced clerk beamed as they walked in.
Can I help you find anything today? We're just looking around,
Squall said. Rinoa didn't think he meant to say it that way. The words weren't intended to be intimidating or slightly threatening, it just was because he was the one who said it. The clerk laughed nervously as he stepped around her booth into the building proper. She looked kind of terrified as Rinoa passed her. She was sweating, looking quickly away as though she didn't want to be a witness. Okay, Rinoa could see Squall was a bit scary. Surely people didn't think he was that scary?
What are we looking for?
Zell asked, perusing the stacks of magazines laying around.
A back door. An open window. Anything that will lead to the TV station. You know, I don't think I've ever actually been inside this building before,
Rinoa said, looking around in wonder.
It's just one of those things I say I'll do and then never do. Well, you're doing it now,
Squall said, peering at one of the magazine stacks.
Yeah, enjoy yourself,
Zell laughed.
Oh, sweet. Look, they have all the retro editions of Combat King. Oh, man. I used to love reading these.
Rinoa laughed as Zell flipped open one of the old magazines and flipped through it. Squall didn't chastise him for it either. He was picking through the old stacks himself. She found herself incredibly curious about what he would consider good reading. Peeking over his shoulder, she snickered.
The Battle series.
He turned to her, his eyebrow raised.
Why not? It's a very informative and interesting series.
Squall,
it's practically an encyclopedia.
Rinoa laughed loudly.
It's nothing but weapon, armor, and monster statistics. It's the most boring combat-based series ever.
Squall shrugged.
I enjoyed it.
She laughed, shrugging.
Somehow, I'm not surprised. Hey, I think the editor's office is this way.
Rinoa pointed down the hall and started walking. Squall made to follow her but was stopped by Zell's hand on his shoulder. He turned to see him passing over a magazine that had been rolled into a tube with a grin on his face. He waited until Rinoa had taken a few steps away from them before whispering to him conspiratorially.
"Squall, check it out,"
he was saying, looking around for watchers. Squall let the tube unroll in his hand and found himself staring into the face of a girl that was completely naked, censored only by the title of the magazine, on her knees blowing a kiss out of the cover with a wink.
"Why did you give me this?"
he asked, giving Zell a dry look. Zell was snickering.
"What? Who doesn't enjoy this? That's the girl next door, man. That magazine is legend. The centerfold is supposed to be so hot you'll pass out from blood loss. Will you get serious?"
Squall shook his head.
"Come on,"
Zell nudged him with a winking grin.
"There's a bathroom right there. You can go in and, choke the chocobo, if you know what I mean." "Please stop." "Stop what?"
Both of them looked up to see Rinoa had come back when she noticed they hadn't been just a step behind her. She was trying to see the magazine in Squall's hand. He quickly closed his palm, hiding the cover from her as he put it behind his back.
"Nothing. Sorry. We're coming." "What's that in your hand?" "Nothing. The editor's office is this way."
Rinoa didn't take no for an answer. Her curiosity drove her and she jumped for the magazine. Squall quickly lifted it over his head. He was taller than her. Keeping it out of her reach would have been easy to do, if he hadn't flinched from the pain of raising his arm so suddenly.
"Oh, will you quit being so macho?"
Rinoa snapped, snatching the magazine from him.
"Just admit you're in pain already and take it easy."
Then her eyes fell on the magazine cover. Zell was already backing away quickly, trying to look nonchalant. Rinoa's face was completely unreadable for a second as Squall quickly schooled his features into a neutral expression. There was absolutely nothing he could say here that wouldn't sound like a lame excuse. After a very long pause, she finally looked up, one eyebrow raised.
"The girl next door? Why, Squall, I had no idea that was your type." "You know very well that I wasn't looking at that." "I'm sure I know nothing at all. It was in your hands, after all. Is this one of those various skills that a seed needs?"
He realized by the twinkle in her eyes as she waved the magazine that she was teasing him. That didn't make it any easier an embarrassment to bear.
"Tell me, because I'm curious,"
she grinned, walking around him.
"Is it the perceived obedience of the more demure girl, or the feeling that she's so sweet and innocent you're walking on untrodden ground, that makes the girl next door type so alluring?" "Neither of which quality is a good one for a life partner,"
Squall returned, putting his hand to his hip as he watched her come around him.
"It's the sense that she's someone you can depend on and settle down with. Which is secondary to the fact that I wasn't even looking at the thing." "Oh, yes, men are staring at this because they're getting off on the thought of settling down with a wife and kids."
She actually opened it and peeked inside. The interior was not nearly so censored as the cover and he made sure to look away.
"I'm guessing it's more of a combo of the two. An untouched, demure sort of female. What man wouldn't like that? Clearly not one that wants an interesting life."
She looked up, her eyes carefully guarded.
"A wise statement, if ever there was one." "Wise? Not so. I simply don't know what kind of woman that is because I've never met one." "Never?" "No. All the women I know are either seeds or seed candidates. I might label some of them as quiet or withdrawn, but never demure. All of which is stemming from a conversation that is completely baseless, because I wasn't looking at it. I just happened to be holding it.
Rinoa laughed at him.
Relax. I saw Zell hand it to you.
He frowned, irritated.
Then why not give him the 3rd degree? Because it's more fun doing it to you,
she laughed, holding out the magazine.
Want this for your inventory?
Growling, Squall grabbed it from her and deliberately set it down on the nearest pile of magazines. She was laughing at him as she turned back towards the editor's office. At the last second, she turned again to face him. Her back arched, pushing her hips out as she squished her breasts between her arms so they protruded forward. One hand rested against her thigh, the other pressed against her lips. In that pose, erotically reminiscent of the cover of the magazine, she blew him a kiss and gave him a wink. Then, laughing, she stood straight and turned on her heel. Hips sashaying temptingly, deliberately, she walked into the office. And Squall was left grateful that she hadn't decided to mimic the centerfolds pose instead. He felt like he was suffering from severe blood loss from that move alone. Squall was nothing if not commander of his own emotions. By the time he had caught up with her and Zell in the editor's office, he was back in control. If his head was suffering from blood loss, no other part of his body gave any indication of it. And Shiva was wisely, kindly keeping any comments to herself. The editor's office was even more cluttered and busy than the front of the trademark building. There were 4 writing stations, 2 of which had people on them. The editor was standing at the window, talking to seemingly no one, as he gestured wildly. Squall ignored him and moved closer to the window. It looked out into the back alley behind the trademark building. With any luck, he would be able to see something from there. Rinoa and Zell stayed beside him as he parted the blinds with his fingers and looked out.
That's the TV station there,
Rinoa pointed to a large building off in the distance.
See that walkway right there, coming over the housing district? That's the old back entrance. It's a straight shot from the alley below us to the TV station if we take that path. Great. So how do we get down there?
Zell frowned.
I haven't seen a back door in here. I guess there isn't one.
Rinoa looked around again as though hoping she would spot one behind a stack of old magazines.
What's that building there?
Squall asked, pointing. There was a man sitting out behind a place, a door next to him and a drink in his hand.
I think that's the pub,
Rinoa said, cocking her head.
All right, then that's our next destination,
Squall nodded. Rinoa grinned.
First a naughty magazine, and now booze? Squall, you degenerate.
He deliberately ignored her as he turned to walk from the office. He thought that the editor was trying to talk to him now, but he was ignoring him. He didn't feel like listening to someone ramble on pointlessly at the moment. No sooner than they hit the street that they caught sight of a group of Army thugs cornering a local teenager that looked on the verge of crying.
Bullies,
Rinoa frowned at them.
Ignore them, we can't do anything.
Squall took her arm and led her away so as to keep her from the temptation of putting her nose in his business. The Galbadian soldiers wouldn't kill the kid, they would just give him a tough time. Rinoa was inclined to agree and kept pace with him without complaint. Though she seemed irritated by Galbadian soldiers in general.
Undisciplined thugs, all of them,
she was mumbling.
It's an organization rotten to the core, right up to their head general. No argument here,
Zell nodded.
Though I don't think I have the right to complain. I mean, technically, I'm a hired thug myself. I just happen to work for a different organization. It's not even close to the same thing,
Rinoa grumbled.
Oh, yeah? How?
Squall asked, his eyebrow going up curiously. Stumped, Rinoa could provide him with no answer. At least the army was an army. They were fighting for people and country. Seeds did not. They were hired guns. Really, by any conventional wisdom, they should be worse than a polished, dedicated army. If the G-Army could be called either of those things.
It just isn't.
She finally snapped.
Come on, the pub is down these steps.
Fuming, Rinoa didn't notice the two G-Army thugs standing at the base of the stairs until she was already halfway down and it was too late to turn and run away.
That was too easy, man.
One of them was laughing as he held something in his hand up to the light to get a better look at it.
You know, for a country bumpkin, he sure had some good stuff.
The second soldier shifted his weight uncomfortably.
Yo, better ease off a little. These timber hicks hate us enough as it is. Hicks!
Rinoa yelled, angry.
You take that back.
Both soldiers turned at the same time and Squall resisted the urge to face palm. Nope, his type was definitely not the sweet, demure kind. He probably had a problem.
Let's get M.
The soldier who had been bragging before said, charging. Zell, ready for just this moment, jumped up onto the stair rail. He slid down like he was grinding on a T-board and jumped at the last second. His fist landed against the louder bully's shoulder and he brought him down with him.
Okay, Rinoa, we'll take that second one,
Squall said, pointing to the other guy.
Wait, what? Me?
She looked surprised at him calling on her.
By the authority of the Galbadian government, I order you to stand down.
He yelled, reaching the base of the steps and looking up at them.
One step at a time,
Squall said calmly.
Pull out your weapon first.
Behind her, he unsheathed his revolver and lifted it with some difficulty due to pain. Hearing him let out a soft hiss of air prompted Rinoa once again. He was hurt because of her. She had to step up or risk him getting hurt further. Trying to control her shaking hands, she reached up and pressed the release on her gauntlet. The blaster edge was a streamlined, aerial weapon. It unfolded from its thin compartment against her arm and formed into a circular blade that was controlled by a combination of magnetism and a boomerang-like quality. It was an easy weapon to use because it required little training. It was slightly difficult to master though, which Rinoa had not yet done. She had picked it because of its ease of operation and lack of necessity for upper arm strength from her.
Put down your weapons and surrender and I promise no harm will come to you.
The soldier down below said, his voice firm. Squall almost believed he was telling the truth.
G-Army standard issue armor protects the important joints and most vital organs,
Squall was telling her in her ear.
You want to aim for the vulnerable areas. The neck seems obvious because it appears unguarded, but they wear a metal collar under the cloth so don't bother. Where then?
She asked, shaking. She couldn't do this. Why was he making her do this?
All the armor is focused on the upper body. Try to hit for the knees or ankles. That will take him down without killing him though. You'll need to deliver the finishing blow from up close. Finishing blow. Put down your weapons. Now. Can you aim with that thing, or not? Oh, of course I can,
she mumbled, raising it up. She didn't have any confidence though as she took aim at the soldier. He saw her moving and started coming up the stairs. Rinoa cried out. Her eyes shut and she hit the release on her weapon. The blaster edge took off sloppily from her arm. She didn't even aim. But the soldier was so close that it was a moot point. The edge hit him in the head and knocked him sideways into the rail. Rinoa reached up and caught her blade on the return. A flash of silver out of the corner of her eye had her turning as Squall lifted his gun and took aim. He let off a quick shot that was strangely cold as it rushed from the barrel. The soldier was close enough now that it actually did some damage to both men. Squall grunted in pain from the recoil. The soldier fell backwards, down the stairs and landed in a heap, unmoving. Zell had already finished his opponent and had been standing back, watching Squall's impromptu lesson without comment. He came forward now to pull the G-soldier's body out of the way. Rinoa let out a long breath as she quickly stowed her weapon away again. Squall was stepping back from her, sheathing his gun blade with a flinch.
Not bad,
Squall praised. She couldn't tell if that flat voice was serious or sarcastic.
Next time, try keeping your eyes open. How could you do that to me?
She demanded, turning. She was freaking out.
I can't do something like that. I was panicking so bad I thought I might pass out. What are you talking about? You did it, didn't you?
Rinoa opened her mouth to tell him that she did not, but she stopped. While Squall had delivered the finishing blow, she was the one who took the soldier down. She did do it, even if it was messy and unprofessional. Messy, but effective. And Seed's appreciated function far more than form.
Look what I found,
Zell said, holding up something he had picked up from the downed guard.
What is it?
Squall reached out and took hold of it.
It's a triad card.
Rinoa beamed.
Kind of weak though.
Squall shrugged and slipped it into his pocket.
I have plenty, but you never know when you're going to lose a hand. You play, Squall?
Rinoa smiled.
No way, seriously.
Zell laughed.
I thought you didn't know how to have fun. Triple Triad is a strategy game that's easily portable and quickly rebuilt in case you find your stuff destroyed. Most seeds play and I enjoy it myself. Okay,
Rinoa held up her hands, stopping him.
I believe you. We should play sometime. I'm not that good, but it could be fun.
Squall nodded once, figuring it couldn't hurt.
Shall we go then?
Zell asked, pointing over his shoulder to the waiting pub. She looked back and finally realized that he had been hanging back, watching over her. She was surrounded by 2 seeds, what did she have to fear from a single soldier? Strange how that wasn't on her mind at the moment of the fight. She sighed and continued down towards the closed doors of the pub. The Timber Pub was a place that was going for upscale, retro hip. The owner had travelled here from Balam to build his business and so wasn't as entrenched in the old styles of timber. The circular bar was made of glass and metal, there was a woman transitioning between a panther and back on a screen against the wall, and the establishment smelled of exotic flowers and alcohol. As soon as they stepped in, they were being treated to the continued tirade of a drunk man leaning against the far wall. No, leaning against the back exit. Seated before it with a drink in his hand, his face strangely wet-looking, and his eyelids being held open at different spots on his eyes.
I've had enough of this city,
he was saying loudly. Slurring loudly.
I come from Dalit to have me a good time, and now, heat trains ain't running no more. Can't even stay in the hotel because of some stupid official. Harassed by Galbadian soldiers. Had my precious card stolen.
He hiccuped again as his head dropped down to his chest in lamentation.
This just hasn't been my day. Those jerks. They think they can use brute force to get anything they want. Hell, this town's a good example. It's sad when men get old,
Rinoa made a face.
Please don't put me in the same category as him,
Squall returned calmly.
It's sad when certain men get old. Better.
She grinned at him as the drunk continued grumbled too loudly as they started across the pub.
Yeah. Everything's jacked up because the resistance tried to kidnap the president. It's thanks to them, the trains have stopped. There's Galbadian jerks all over the place. All because of them. Don't they understand I'm the one suffering from their reckless actions?
Rinoa stiffened at Squall's side at the drunk's selfish comment.
Stupid, boneheaded, good-for-nothing, resistance. They can all just kiss my... Hey!
Rinoa stepped forward angrily at the same time that one of the bar patrons jumped to his feet with just as much anger. It was him that continued.
You don't understand anything. The resistance is fighting for Timber's future. They're all doing the best they can. It's the Galbadian soldiers and their leader who's at fault.
Psh! The drunk slapped his hand down as though to push the comment away. Squall ignored the man and walked over to the bar owner who was eyeing the drunk like he dearly wished to throw him out.
Hey,
Squall greeted shortly. He knew that the owner hadn't noticed him before because he jumped slightly. Then to a greater degree when he saw Squall.
Yes. Can we use your back door?
Squall was being polite. Why was he staring like that?
Oh, well, I wouldn't mind letting you, but...
He trailed off, gesturing to the drunk.
He's refusing to move and throws a fit if anyone touches him. Can't you call law enforcement?
The owner laughed.
You're not from around here, hey? Galbadia is the law enforcement around here. And I doubt highly that they would make this situation any better. Fine, I'll deal with it myself.
The bar owner frowned at him now.
Hey, the inspection people get mad when there's blood spilled in the bar. And it looks really bad when people are killed in it, too. I'm not going to kill him.
Though it was tempting. Squall stepped over to the drunk and stopped before him. The drunk had a hard time focusing his eyes on Squall's boots. His gaze moved up slowly, taking him in with a flinch.
Damn, you ugly. What's that on your face? We need to get through.
Squall's voice was firm and uncaring. The man threw out his hands, dropping his bottle in the process.
Geez, and now I'm getting dissed by some punk? This day just keeps getting better and better. Yo, owner. Gimme another drink.
The owner made no move to do so and Squall didn't blame him. The man was already severely overserved. He didn't need more alcohol. He observed him for a long second. Then, without looking away, he reached into his pocket.
Hey! Is this your card? Hey!
The drunk looked up again and had some trouble focusing now on the card.
Why hey? Yeah, it is. Why do you have it? Found it outside.
Rinoa snickered into her hand just behind him, but the drunk didn't appear to notice.
You serious?
The drunk started laughing, his face getting red.
Okay then. Thanks. Know what? I'm feeling pretty generous now. So you can keep that card. And also this one.
From inside his pocket, he pulled/slashed through another card. It slipped through his drunk fingers and slid to a halt at Squall's feet. Zell reached down to retrieve it as the drunk continued laughing.
That turned around quickly,
Rinoa laughed.
Can I have that card? Take them both,
Squall said carelessly, passing it to her without looking.
Oh, hey yeah, let me move for you, too.
The drunk attempted to stand, slipped and fell right on his face. He started laughing again.
Hey, owner. I can't stand up. Can you help me?
The owner, probably more than used to his share of sweaty, nasty drunks, rolled up his sleeves and stepped forward. Working together, the drunk probably hindering more than helping, they managed to slide him out of the way of the door. Squall was already leaving the pub as the drunk continued laughing maniacally.
That went well,
Rinoa said, stepping out after him.
Yeah, my experience with drunks isn't usually that good,
Zell laughed.
I'm just glad we didn't have to fight him. That would have been awkward.
Squall looked up at a window that opened as he passed under it. A pair of kids were leaning out, loudly declaring their guilt in attacking the president. He wondered if they were repeating something their parents had said or thought that it was funny. The back alleys of Timber were completely clear of Galbadian soldiers. There was no one to stop them or even see them as they passed through, which Squall saw as a serious breach in security. This pathway was just begging to be used for illegal activity if no one watched it.
I think it should be this way,
Rinoa said, pointing at a black gate that was hanging halfway off of its hinges. She opened it and let the boys through.
Whoa, look at that! An outdoor TV! And it's huge!
Zell said, pointing up at a catwalk above a long stairway.
That's the way to the TV station,
Rinoa said, grabbing the bottom rail.
Let's go. Do you think you can tell us the plan now?
Squall asked, one step behind her.
Oh, sure. So, this leads us right to the back. We're going to use that and sneak inside before the president and his security gets there. Then we hide out until they do. We'll have the element of surprise to launch an all-out attack against the president's guards. Then we'll have the president in hand, the cameras rolling, and Timber's independence on the waves.
Wait. That was it? Squall and Zell shared a look as they continued climbing. Neither said anything though. As they reached the catwalk, Rinoa frowned at the large TV. There was some strange static coming through on the screen. It was hissing, rolling along almost hypnotically. Big words rolling through red static repeating the same thing over and over again. I will never let you forget about me. I am alive here, bring me back there. I will never let you forget about me. I am alive here, bring me back there. I will never let you forget about me. I am alive here, bring me back there.
This is creepy,
she frowned, rubbing her arms.
What is it? This is the noise that's being broadcast over the frequencies,
Squall explained.
It appeared suddenly one day and is the reason radio waves don't work any longer. Something has to be done about it before they can broadcast anything over the air. Oh, really?
Zell frowned.
I always wondered why the waves stopped working. Sir.
The three of them turned back to see what's running at them, stopping halfway up the stairs.
The presidents entered the studio. There's too many guards now, so we won't be able to storm the place, sir. Seriously?
Rinoa sighed, blowing a strand of hair from her face.
All right, fine. Watts, go find out more.
He nodded and ran off as Rinoa crossed her arms thoughtfully.
So we can't rush in, I guess. We've gotta come up with a new plan now. Oh, hey. If the president leaves, maybe the guards will be gone too? That's when we do our broadcast. It might not be as influential, but it's better than nothing. We don't stand a chance taking them head on, right?
Squall shrugged carelessly, still looking up at the screen, trying to read the static.
Don't worry about us. We'll fight your enemies based on your decision. That's our duty.
Rinoa frowned at him and looked to Zell. He didn't appear bothered by Squall's statement. He was grinning happily.
You tell us to go, we go,
he said, moving his hands in demonstration. Then he shrugged, laughing slightly.
Even if it is a losing battle.
Rinoa's face fell as she looked at the two of them. Squall's hand, his ribs. Zell didn't appear to care. Squall barely looked like he was paying attention. She had heard, of course, that seeds were obedient and would do whatever was ordered. She didn't think she realized until this very second just how deep that obedience ran. They didn't even appear as real people to her in that moment. Not even robots. They were puppets on strings that were passed from garden to client. They didn't get to dance on their own. They didn't even get to fight a decision that could end their own lives. And neither of them even appeared even slightly bothered by that fact.
How sad,
she whispered, catching their attention.
Act on my decision? That's your duty? Oh, what an easy life it must be, just to follow orders.
Squall shrugged, completely unaffected by her tone or gaze.
Call it what you want. All we desire is for you to achieve your goal using our help.
He scoffed slightly.
I find it hard to believe that you can do it, though.
Rinoa's face burned red as her temper flared. That condescending look. Oh, how she hated more than anything that condescending look.
What did you say? If you have something you want to get off your chest, then say it.
He rather wished he hadn't spoken. He was pretty sure he would lose points for that comment if this were an exam.
Never mind. No, you started it.
She stomped her foot again, her hair seeming to flare with her anger.
The least you can do is finish it. Come on, what's on your mind? Just forget it.
Cool and collected. She was beginning to seriously despise that expression.
Tell me,
she said, her voice low and dangerous.
This is an order. An order from your client?
Like it was a magic spell, an obvious order made him move. He turned to her and his cool eyes were suddenly no longer as pretty as they had been only a few minutes ago. It was an entirely different thing to feel the cold of their gaze on her instead of seeing it placed on another.
How serious are you? Really?
He asked like she had been cracking jokes all day. In his mind, she practically was.
The three of you plop down on the floor to discuss strategy and come up with just run in? On top of that, you can't make a decision without our input, can you? How do you think we feel, working for such an organization? We're the top tier, highest trained warriors in the world and we've been given to a resistance that thinks storm the place is a viable strategy for 3 people against a platoon of soldiers. Even with the element of surprise. Hey,
Zell's hand was suddenly at his shoulder.
You're being too hard, man.
Damn. Rinoa's eyes were swimming and he couldn't tell if it was anger or sadness. Either way, he was pretty sure he had just put his foot in it. He wasn't wrong, but he probably could have been more diplomatic in telling her. It was things like this that kept him from leadership programs. He just didn't know how to not use his overly sharp tongue.
Sorry,
he said, his distant voice making it sound insincere.
Guess I got a little carried away.
Rinoa was shaking her head. She reached up and angrily wiped the tears from her face.
You know, maybe this was all a big mistake. I thought everything would work out fine once Seed came to help us. But I guess it's not that easy.
It rarely was.
You were all hired. It's not like you're one of us.
Did she just realize that? She shook her head.
We'll cancel the plan, and we'll disperse for now. We don't stand a chance if we take M head on. So.
She paused and her eyes glared up at him.
You guys probably think this is all a game to us. Well, it's not. We're serious. So serious. It hurts.
Just like that, she turned on her heel and sprinted down the stairs and away. Squall watched her go with calm eyes. It was better this way, he told himself. Better that he push her away before he really got attached. It would make it that much harder when she left. As she was going down, she passed Selfie, who was carrying a small vial of gently glowing water. She turned and watched her run before taking the stairs up 2 at a time.
What happened?
She asked, looking back to where Rinoa was running down the alley. She moved pretty fast, Squall noted.
Just a reality check,
he replied calmly, unsure of who he was referring to.
What's that? Hey, oh, this. It's called the Owl's Tear. It was at some old guy's house. I got this and a couple hundred gil that I found stashed away. That's another story though. The old man said I had to bring this to you quickly because it doesn't last longer than an hour once it's been bottled away from its source spring. Here.
Squall reached out and took the smile vial curiously. Shrugging, he pulled out the stopper and downed the entire thing in a single gulp. It tasted cool and refreshing. He lowered it as he waited patiently. He could feel it falling down into his stomach. Then he could feel the magic in the substance start reaching out. Shiva grabbed onto it, guiding it through his body to the most grievously injured parts of him. Squall flinched once it hit him. Then he straightened and rotated his chest as suddenly breathing wasn't painful anymore.
Wow,
he said, looking at the vial.
That's impressive. I know, right?
Selfie laughed.
I think the water must be originating in the same place as a Kuro well of magic, maybe even Kuraga. They must be fusing together as they make their way to the surface. It's pretty cool. Too bad it doesn't last. Someone could get rich bottling it.
Squall nodded as he felt even the memory of pain from his broken ribs fade. As he was stretching his sore muscles, the fuzz on the giant TV monitor began increasing.
Hey! They starting?
Zell asked as the standard frequency started shifting. Squall and Selfie looked up as the screen winked a few times. Then the fuzz was gone and, for the first time in almost 20 years, there was a broadcast over the air. A couple of technicians were the first thing on screen. Squall could barely hear them saying something about checks, tests, and quality. As they realized the video feed was streaming, they quickly ducked and ran out of sight, revealing a podium and the Galbadian national emblem. A blond man walked onto the screen. His blue pinstripe suit didn't work well with his rather rotund figure. Then again, neither did his bright blonde hair and boyish blue eyes. He looked like he had a baby head strapped onto a man's body.
Testing 1. 2. Testing.
Testing, he said, tapping his fingers against the microphones. His voice was initially as fuzzy as the original screen, but it cleared up. He looked surprised suddenly.
Oh. People of the world. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Oh, this is incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a recording. This is an actual broadcast over the air. Yes, it's been 17 years since a live broadcast has been possible.
Someone clearly said something to him from off-screen because he jumped and looked to the side. He then cleared his throat and got himself back under control.
Please, excuse me. I seem to have lost my composure.
Then the music kicked in. Squall's eyebrow raised at the pomp of it all.
We would like to present to you today a message from the lifelong president of Galbadia, VIII Delling. Ladies and gentlemen, President Delling. Who's this guy supposed to be?
Zell frowned, leaning back against the rails. They watched as the aide walked off of the podium and President Delling walked on. It was kind of odd seeing him now on a screen after having watched his face melt just yesterday into a monster that slobbered blue mucus.
Greetings,
he said calmly, regally into the camera.
I am VIII Delling, lifelong president of Galbadia. Today, I stand before you to make the following proposition. We the people of the world have the power to end all wars. See.
Selfie pointed eagerly at the screen.
It's a peace proposal to the world. I knew it.
Squall made a noncommittal sound in the back of his throat. Though it was a completely neutral sound, it was filled with doubt.
Unfortunately, there are some trifling problems standing between Galbadia and the other nations, and they must be resolved. I plan to convene with the other nations' leaders immediately to resolve these problems. At this time, allow me introduce the ambassador who will be my representative for this conference.
Zell let out a long sigh, his head falling back.
Man! All this just to introduce an ambassador. This ambassador is the sorceress. Sorceress!
Squall repeated, his eyes narrowing in surprise as the two with him suddenly looked quite seriously towards the screen. A sorceress? A real sorceress? Had he actually found one? They didn't get to find out. President Deling's eyes suddenly looked over past the camera. A strange look appeared on his face a moment before a body fell in front of the screen. The camera was quickly toppled over onto its side as cries of fear and pain echoed out through the microphones. The flashy silver trench coat with the large, pointed cross on the back identified Cypher even though he didn't face the camera directly.
Hey!
Selfie pointed.
Cypher!
Zell looked gobsmacked.
What's he doing?
Selfie asked Squall like he could possibly know. At that moment, a pair of brown boots stepped into the shot. They slowly revealed the salmon-colored skirt and top then golden hair of Quistis as she carefully stepped in closer towards Cypher. She was saying something to try to calm Cypher, but they couldn't hear her. Nor, apparently, could Cypher. He was already grabbing for the middle-aged president. A president that could not fight on his own. He was captured easily and Cypher had his Hyperion at his neck.
Instructor Treep,
Zell said, his mouth falling open. The boots of Galbadian soldiers came forward and Quistis turned quickly.
Stay back. Squall, what are we going to do?
Zell asked him, looking between his leader and the screen.
For the last time, stay back.
Quistis continued to yell.
You're only going to provoke him. Nothing,
Squall said calmly.
Our job is to assist the owls. It's none of our business.
As though she had just noticed it was there, Quistis caught sight of the toppled camera and her eyes widened. She stepped towards it quickly.
Timber team, are you watching? Get over here right now. You have permission. I need your help.
Squall. Zell looked to him.
Captain.
Selphie jumped to attention. Permission was all he needed. Squall turned and led his team up to the path towards the back entrance of the TV studio. Quistis was trying to keep herself calm as she watched Cypher hold his blade to President Deliang's exposed neck. She was not inexperienced with death. Yet, somehow, this seemed wrong. There was no order here. No contract. This wasn't a job. It was plain murder. Though she hadn't wanted to do it, Quistis had no choice but to chase him all the way out here. She needed to get him under control. With Cypher, it was like trying to calm a typhoon made of fire. She could sooner control a rampaging chocobo. Hurried footsteps told her that, finally, Squall and the others had arrived. She had been scarred for a moment that they wouldn't have seen the broadcast. She was only managing to keep the G-soldiers out of here because she insisted their presence would only make things worse and end up with the president dead and a war on their hands.
We need to restrain him,
she said as she heard Squall's boots slow to a walk. She didn't look away from Cypher, as though scared he might act if she did. Selphie and Zell hung back slightly, but Squall came forward confidently. Somehow, it was surreal to see his longtime training partner holding a world leader hostage.
What do you think you're doing?
He asked incredulously, shaking his head at him.
It's obvious, ain't it?
Cypher grinned at him, his eyes wild. That hungry look Squall hadn't wanted to see during the battle at Dalit was back again. He couldn't ignore it this time. Cypher gestured with his head towards the surprisingly calm Deliang.
What are you planning to do with this guy?
He demanded to know.
Planning to do?
Squall frowned. For a moment, he didn't understand. The only reason Squall wanted President Deliang at all was because Rinoa. Oh, that's right. Cypher knew Rinoa. Was that why he was here?
Oh, I get it.
Zell said, realization coming over his face.
You're Reno's. Shut your dem mouth, chicken wuss.
Cypher snapped, cutting him off. Selphie nudged Zell, telling him without words to hold his peace. Quistis turned to Squall, her face drawn with fatigue from chasing Cypher across the ocean.
He broke out of the disciplinary room yesterday, injuring many in the process. Not to mention the structural damage. You?
Zell growled at him, his fists shaking.
Stupid idiot.
Zell, please, for once in your life.
Be quiet,
Squall ordered him gently but firmly. Zell wasn't hearing it. He was grinning at Quistis already.
Instructor, I know. You're going to take this stupid idiot back to garden, right? Shut up. No.
Squall roared, trying to cut him off. It was too late. The damage was done. The formerly impassive Deliang suddenly grinned.
Ah, I see. You're all from garden. Baumgarten, I'd be willing to wager.
All four seats and Cypher froze in place. Delling tilted his head as though amused.
Should anything happen to me, the entire Galbadian military will undoubtedly crush Baumgarten.
He laughed slightly.
You can let go of me now.
Cypher was snarling, glaring at Zell with glowing hatred.
Nice going, chicken wuss. You and your stupid big mouth.
A look of horror came over Zell's face as he realized what he had done. Too late now to take the words back. Too late to reverse what was done. Cypher, however, didn't appear the least concerned for his garden. He started stepping back, his Hyperion forcing Delling to step with him.
I'll leave you to take care of this mess. Instructor and Mr. Leader.
They waited until he had stepped from the room before giving chase. They couldn't very well let him kill the president. They were mercenaries, yes, and killing was part of the job. However, this was not a job. This was a crime, pure and simple. Balam would offer no protection to Cypher if he did something to the president now. The backstage room held little more than a curtain and an old sound stage for a show that had ages been off the air. Equipment was now strewn around. The dust covering everything had been hastily removed in preparation for the president's arrival, yet everything seemed to retain that untouched, undisturbed quality. The strange mist coating the room as Cypher backed into it was the only new thing. He turned his head around quickly. What was he even doing here? How was this a good idea? How had he had any other choice? They had given this assignment to Squall of all people. How could he have stood idly by while Squall came here and proved himself better than Cypher? It was just not allowed. Cypher was better than Squall. He was more experienced. He was the better fighter. The scar on Squall's face was testament to that. What was he doing here? The mist wrapped around him. A sweet, familiar perfume tinted the air, tickling the very edges of his memory as fear started to rise up in him. The gentle click of heels on wood had him turning so quickly he almost accidentally slit President Deling's neck. The woman that stepped around from behind the curtain shouldn't have been there. She regarded him with calm, distant eyes as she moved through the fog. He could barely see her face, but his nerves were suddenly humming with recognition of her power.
Poor boy,
she said. Her voice was low, slow, hypnotic. The long black gown she wore trailed on the ground as she came in closer. A slight tinkling came from the ornamentation on her head. Her eyes seemed to glow bright gold.
Stay away from me!
Cypher yelled at her, taking a step back. He had the president between them like a human shield. She paid him no mind.
Such a confused little boy.
She sounded so distant, like she was reading from a page.
Are you going to step forward? Retreat? You have to decide. Stay back.
The woman didn't listen, she kept coming in closer. Quick footsteps from the hall signaled that another was coming. For a brief moment, Cypher felt a flash of relief that he wouldn't be alone. The woman didn't appear the least affected. She raised her arm and a burst of magic behind Cypher stopped the steps dead. He looked back quickly to see that Instructor Treep had reached them first. She was staring down at the floor with dead eyes, dropped onto her knee.
The boy in you is telling you to come.
His eyes flashed back to the woman. She was no closer to him, but she was clearer. Was the fog lifting or was that just her?
The adult in you is telling you to back off.
Her hand moved up over her face, touching herself gently as she regarded him with emotionless eyes.
You can't make up your mind. You don't know the right answer. You want help, don't you? You want to be saved from this predicament? Shut up.
His voice broke. It was like she was seeing into his mind. It only made it worse.
Don't be ashamed to ask for help. After all, you're only a little boy. I'm not. Stop calling me a boy.
Cypher yelled, shaking his head. She looked curious.
You don't want to be a boy anymore. I am not a boy.
She smiled at him gently. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. And he could suddenly feel her right there in his mind. In his heart. In his very soul. Reaching out to him. Offering him the reality of every dream he had ever desired. His hands numb, Cypher released Deling without even looking. The president took that moment and sprinted away, throwing the woman a look as he did so.
Come with me,
she said, beckoning Cypher forward.
Come with me to a place of no return. Bid farewell to your childhood.
She pointed to the door where Squall, Zell, and Selfie were running at him. Cypher grinned at Squall and lifted his Hyperion to wave him goodbye. The woman, the sorceress, lifted her hand again at Squall and released another spell. The three seeds dropped down beside Quistis, their eyes losing focus. Cypher turned from them without looking back. The sorceress stepped aside and pointed to where he needed to walk. To fulfill his dreams. She would give him dreams. The sweetest dreams. She would give him everything he could ever want.
And in return,
she whispered to him as they crossed through portal and space together.
You shall be my slave.
To Squall and the others, it was like no more than single blink had passed. Cypher was there, then suddenly he wasn't anymore. Quistis looked around, running forward, but he was gone. The president was gone. The building felt empty around them again.
What was that?
Zell asked, looking around. Quistis looked back to the three of them as another pair of footsteps echoed from the side hall. They turned to see Rinoa running in from off stage.
Hey, guys,
she waved absent-mindedly. She was already looking around.
Where's Cypher?
She had come all the way out here to see him, Squall thought. He looked to Quistis, but she shrugged at the question. She didn't remember anything that happened either. Squall turned back to Rinoa and said calmly,
We don't know.
Rinoa's eyes downcast as she lost herself to her thoughts.
He'll be okay. Right.
Squall didn't say anything, but she wasn't looking for an answer. She turned on her heel and stared, walking from the studio. Because he was still technically in her employ, Squall followed after her. And because she had nothing else to do, Quistis followed after him. Rinoa left the TV station through the back entrance. She moved quickly across the city catwalk down towards the back alley. She remained lost in her own thoughts. It wasn't until she was going back down the stairs that she finally turned to look up at Squall.
They found our base,
she said, her eyes sad.
It's completely destroyed.
Selfie gasped, leaning over the rail to look down at her.
Is everyone all right?
The sadness lifted slightly as Rinoa giggled.
They're fine. They're good at escaping.
Her eyes moved over to Squall, and the mirth and sadness both lifted as a veil came over her eyes. The look lasted only a second, but it spoke volumes about how she still remembered too vividly his earlier words said in anger. Squall returned the look with one of his own. Distant. Withdrawn. Unaffected. A look perfected after many years. Because he didn't care if she drew back now. In fact, he preferred that she leave on his terms. Rinoa turned and continued down the stairs. Quistis was just a step behind her. As they came into the alleyway, Angelo was laying near the rusted black gate. He lifted his head as Rinoa approached. With the train destroyed, he had to follow her around again. As Squall and the others came down the stairs, Rinoa sat against a crate. She smiled at Quistis.
"I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself,"
she said, realizing her lapse in manners.
"My name is Rinoa. I'm with the Forest Owls. I'm Squall's employer."
Quistis nodded to her once, smiling gently.
"I'm Quistis. I'm Squall's comrade and former instructor." "Former instructor? Really? Then, could you tell me something? Is he always so short? I mean, is he really that mean, or is it me?"
"Oh, no," Quistis laughed, shaking her hand at her.
"It's not you. Squall is just an unfriendly, introverted sort of guy. He treats everyone that way. I wouldn't be offended by it if I were you." "Really? Even if he said some rather mean stuff?" "He snapped at you?"
For a second, Rinoa wondered if she had just gotten him in trouble. But then Quistis laughed.
"My! He must really like you." "Hey! Squall is very formal and polite with people he doesn't like. If he's snapping and being extra mean, then that must mean he likes you enough to feel comfortable being angry with you. That's a very rare honor."
Quistis continued laughing as Rinoa blinked at her. She turned her head as Squall reached the bottom of the stairs and started walking towards them. His face was impassive, again. He wasn't looking at her, but when she moved to stand, his eyes snapped to her. Like he was aware of what she was doing. Like he was watching her without staring. He liked her, so he was mean to her? That didn't seem at all right. If he liked her, he should be wanting to get closer, not pushing her away.
"I don't think we should leave this alley just yet," she said. "The town is swarming with Galbadian soldiers. It's like someone kicked a wasp hive. The owls are all getting out until things calm down."
Squall nodded. That made sense.
"You're going to be in even more danger now." "Hey? Why me?" "Because Sal said your name on air."
The blonde in question flinched and looked down. Hot guilt was so thick in his belly it was making him sick. Squall's tone wasn't at all forgiving either. Squall continued without looking back at him.
"They're going to connect your name with ciphers and begin hunting for you. You need to get out of Timber more than anyone."
Rinoa hadn't considered that and she frowned at the implications of it. She really liked Timber. She had made this place her home. She didn't want to leave. But he wasn't wrong. No doubt the entire Galbadian army had seen that broadcast from the lowest petty soldier to the general himself. She wouldn't be safe here, probably for a long time. She looked up again to see Squall watching her with quiet eyes.
"Is there a safe place you can take me?"
she asked. Then, for insurance, she added,
"This is an order." "An order from your client? Okay."
He stared at her for a long moment and she felt very much like a specimen in a lab. She thought he might protest. That she might have overstepped her bounds as his employer. But he just nodded.
All right. We'll start heading out of Timber first. The longer we remain here, the less likely we'll be able to escape unscathed. Where are we going? We'll figure that out when we're not so exposed and vulnerable. Come on, let's get back to the pub.
Quistis was smiling with pride as Squall led them naturally. The mantle of leadership, small as it was in this moment, looked good on him. And he wore it well. There was someone already waiting for them in the pub. A slightly older woman with a stained apron and long, braided hair. She was standing in the entrance, like she was blocking it with her girth. Her eyes sharpened on Rinoa as she came into the bar.
Rinoa!
She yelled, calling her forward.
I heard your base is in serious trouble. Come over to my place until things settle down. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Rinoa beamed at her. Squall looked like he might protest as the woman left. He didn't want cover. He wanted to get out of Timber as quickly as possible.
Squall!
Quistis turned to him.
What are you waiting for? Come on! We don't even know where we're going yet. We can use the reprieve.
He nodded once, though he wished it weren't true. He following her to the entrance. Rinoa was already running up the stairs, chasing after the woman. She wanted to get off of the streets and away from the Galbadians as quickly as she could. The Seeds kept pace with her easily. Their eyes all scanned for soldiers as they made their way to a house that was set rather close to the pub. Zell was last inside and he shut the door quickly, throwing the lock as they all caught their breaths. The woman nodded to them.
I'll go keep watch outside and let you know if anything changes. Till then, make yourself at home. There's food on the stove and the bathroom is over there. Thanks, Chief,
Rinoa waved at her.
Chief!
Squall repeated once the door had closed behind her.
Oh, she's the leader of the Forest Fox,
Rinoa laughed.
Almost everyone's a resistance member in this town. But right now, we're the only ones that are really active. Well, we were. Don't worry about it, Rinoa.
Selfie smiled at her, putting her arm over her shoulder. Selfie was so tiny that it was like she was trying to hug a tall tree.
There's setbacks in every war. Been in many, have you? Only the one. But woo boy, the setbacks.
Rinoa frowned, because she sounded serious.
I hope that woman doesn't mind if I eat,
Quistis said, making her way to the stove.
I haven't had a chance to since yesterday morning.
The large pot of stew simmering looked like it was meant to feed far more than one person. They all helped themselves and the hot food felt good after so long of non-stop moving. All except Zell, that is. He remained standing in the corner, refusing to look or speak to anyone. There was no way he could possibly eat. Not with the guilt eating him alive. Squall left him alone as everyone else cleaned up and he went around closing the drapes on all the windows. The likelihood of Galbadian soldiers peeking inside instead of just busting down the door was rather low, but he would rather not risk it.
Ah, that was good,
Rinoa said, leaning back and patting her stomach.
It's been a while since I had a home-cooked meal like that. I can't remember ever having a home-cooked meal,
Selfie laughed.
But if that's what it's like, then I'm all down to have many more.
Squall didn't understand the fuss. Food was food. What did it matter how it tasted?
Squall.
Rinoa looked over to him as he walked across the kitchen.
How are your ribs?
Fine, he said without looking up.
What happened to Squall's ribs?
Quistis asked Selfie. Rinoa stood up, frowning at him.
You keep saying that. I don't think you know what fine means. You should really sit down and rest. He broke them,
Selfie giggled.
Rinoa, I'm fine,
Squall insisted as he turned to face her near the living room sofa.
Stop worrying. He didn't.
Quistis's eyes went wide as Selfie nodded excitedly.
How did he do that? Yeah. You're a seed and you'll happily kill yourself for the cause.
She rolled her eyes.
Well, I'm not. I'm a normal person and us normal people become concerned when other people break bones. Now either sit and rest your broken ribs or I'll command you to rest them. There's nothing to rest.
Rinoa reached out to smack her hands against Squall's broken ribs. She would let him hiss in pain to prove her point, then force him to sit for a while. Her small hand smacked against a wall of solid muscle under a white cotton shirt. He didn't hiss in pain, he wasn't even jostled by her strike. For a moment, she thought he was holding it in, so she pressed harder against his chest, moving her hand across the afflicted area. He continued to stare at her as the kitchen fell suddenly silent. Rinoa kept her eyes on his face as she felt around for fractures that she had chanced upon just this morning. When he continued to be completely unaffected, she frowned. She didn't really think as she grabbed for the hem of his shirt. She just wanted to crack that CY exterior and see him admit he needed rest. When one broke bones, they rested them. However, when she jerked his shirt up, her first thought wasn't for his broken ribs. Oh, Hein. Squall was sculpted like a Centran god. His body, so deceptively lean with his clothes on, was just like his arms. Pure muscle tone and tan skin. There were a few scars peppered against his battle-hardened flesh, but it didn't detract at all from the fine lines of his chest. And, where his ribs were cracked, there wasn't even a hint of bruising. When Rinoa reached up for the area, she told herself it was just to check for broken ribs. She nearly shivered at the feeling of his rock-hard body.
Satisfied?
Squall asked and Rinoa jumped. For just a split second, she took that the wrong way. Because no, not even slightly yet. Then reality came back to her and she realized he was waiting for her to check his wounds so that she would stop pestering him about them. And also she had just stripped him in the middle of someone else's living room with an audience of 3. Her hands jerked back like his body was a live wire. Boy, was it. Squall settled his shirt back in place, looking at her with calm eyes.
I've already taken care of it,
he was telling her.
I told you, you don't need to worry about me.
She sighed.
Kind of hard not to when you go breaking ribs.
The house continued to be silent for a long moment as Squall and Rinoa stared at each other. And Quistis stared between them, her mouth open slightly.
Hey, you know what I don't get?
Selfie said suddenly into the tense silence.
What did Cypher even come here for?
Rinoa started guilty as she turned. She bit her lip as she realized what she was doing. And after Cypher had come all the way out here.
I think he came to help us. The forest owls, I mean. I talked about it a lot with him. So, please, don't think too badly of him.
The 3 of them, except Zell, who was too focused on his corner. All gave her hooded looks. And she realized that these three knew Cypher a lot better than she did. Just by virtue of knowing him longer, they knew him better. And that look wasn't encouraging.
"Look, Cypher isn't all bad," she said. "I know he's got a bit of an attitude, but..." "A bit,"
Selfie snickered. Rinoa didn't get to follow up on that comment. A sudden, rushed pounding at the door grabbed all of their attention at the same moment.
"Anybody in here?"
An official, angry voice yelled.
"Galbadian,"
Squall whispered, grabbing Rinoa's arm and walking her slowly back into the kitchen. Then, like an angry mother hen, they heard the chief of the forest fox.
"What is this? I have 2 small children in there. Don't you dare do anything to frighten them."
A young woman ran down the stairs and gestured for them to come closer. From her face, she appeared to be related to the chief of the forest fox.
"Upstairs,"
she whispered.
"Hurry."
They followed her order without hesitation, but Rinoa stopped on the stairs, forcing Selfie, who was behind her, to stop as well. She looked to the door, her face drawn in worry.
"Will she be okay?"
The young woman laughed.
"She'll be fine. The legend goes that my mother took down many soldiers during the war with her strength, cooking, and beauty." "That beauty part sure makes it sound like a legend,"
Selfie said, earning a look before following Rinoa the rest of the way up the stairs. They took refuge in a small room that had a window looking out into the alley below that they had crossed to get here. There was a cat on the bed. Zell stood by the oven, staring down into the cold coals with an unreadable expression on his face. The others just left him alone as they spread out. Squall stood closest to the stairs so he could hear what was going on downstairs. If they were about to be rushed by Galbadian soldiers, he would rather know beforehand.
"How did Cypher even get here?"
Rinoa asked, looking at Quistis. She shook her head, frowning.
"He was so angry when he found out it was only the 3 of you dispatched to Timber." "What? They might end up fighting the whole Galbadian army. And all they dispatch are 3 rookie seed members. Damn it! I'm going to Timber."
Squall had a brief moment of amusement that her Cypher impression was as bad as her Squall impression. She was shaking her head again.
"I never would have guessed he was serious about it."
He was always serious. She should know that by now. And the disciplinary room? They put his cult on guard duty for him? That was bound to work out well. Squall was surprised it took him so long to break out in the first place. Quistis looked over to him.
"What do you think is going to happen to him?"
Squall shrugged.
"He may already be dead."
Rinoa gasped. She stepped forward, her face angry at him again. Slightly hurt. He watched her coming with a raised eyebrow. Why was she trying to fight with him again?
"How can you be so casual?"
she asked, shaking her head.
"I feel sorry for him."
Squall couldn't help it, he started laughing. She felt sorry for him? Wow, would Cypher hate to hear something like that? It was, Rinoa realized, the first time she had ever seen him actually breaking that calm facade, and to laugh to less. It wasn't a good experience.
"What's so funny?"
she demanded to know, stomping her foot.
"You're terrible."
Squall controlled his laughing back into his usual expression. He didn't seem bothered by her accusation.
"Why do you think he may already be dead?"
She had to know, she couldn't resist. It wasn't obvious.
The president of Galbadia joined forces with a sorceress. Do you know anyone else that can spirit someone away from a room guarded on all sides besides a sorceress? It's not a surprise that Cypher may have been killed for attacking the president. The sorceress would see to it. Even so.
Rinoa shook her head. She didn't want to hear cold logic. She looked at him, an almost hopeful expression on her face.
I still hope he's alive.
She could think what she wanted, but reality wasn't so kind. Everything doesn't work out the way people hope it will. That's why.
As long as you don't get your hopes up, you can take anything. You feel less pain.
He instructed her calmly like he had when he had taught her how to junction Diablos. Rinoa blinked at him in surprise. That was such a bleak outlook on life. Surely he couldn't really believe something like that?
Anyway,
he shrugged,
whatever you wish to have is none of my business. You're mean,
she breathed as though surprised. No matter what Quistis had told her earlier, there was no denying that was what he was.
Meanie.
She turned and ran away to stand as far from him as she could in the little room. Squall watched her go with a strange look on his face. Meanie? He didn't think he had been called a meanie since ever. What was with her? What could she possibly expect from him? Sorry, he said at last, more because he was supposed to than because he was sorry. He was sorry though that she had lost someone close to her. That was a very difficult sort of pain to bear. He could empathize with that, if nothing else. They stayed the night in the Fox Chief's house. It wasn't really a comfortable night. Zell was even more withdrawn than Squall. Quistis was exhausted. Rinoa was angry and sad. Squall was himself. That left only Selfie to be happy, and she looked so out of place that she couldn't even try. The next morning, as the young woman passed out breakfast upstairs, the Fox Chief came up and looked around at the group of them.
The bulk of the Galbadian forces are withdrawing with the president, she said. Only the soldiers normally stationed here will stick around, and they're going to be so busy seeing the president off for the next few hours that the security will be lax. If you're gonna leave town, now's your best chance.
Thank you, Squall said, nodding to her. She nodded back to him and returned downstairs. They all finished their food quickly before starting down after her. No point in delaying.
Squall,
Quistis stopped him as he moved towards the door.
Any thoughts on where to go?
They still needed to get out of town.
Getting out of here is only the first step,
she said as though she could read his mind. Squall turned to her. She was in instructor mode. She was trying to walk him to a conclusion that she already knew. He rather wished she would just tell him.
What do you mean? Garden Code, Article 8, Line 7,
she said calmly. Like she expected him to have memorized the code. Which he had. 8-7. In the even that returning to the assigned garden is not possible.
Report to the nearest garden,
he said as though reading it from the article itself.
Very good,
Quistis nodded, pleased with him.
From here, that would be Galbadia Garden. Is that safe?
Rinoa frowned.
Aren't they, you know, Galbadian? Balam Garden has contracts with both other gardens,
Quistis assured her.
Both Galbadia and Trabia Garden can act as a sort of safe haven for seeds in the field if they need it. We'll be able to work out a method to get back to Balam from there. Well, in that case, we can take a train from here and get off on East Academy Station,
Rinoa said.
It's the closest station to Galbadia Garden without first going through Deling City.
Quistis nodded, agreeing with her.
From there, we would have to go through the forest west of the station to get to the garden. I've been through several times. There's a few tough monsters, but nothing we shouldn't be able to handle. Okay then, we'll escape and head to Galbadia Garden,
Squall nodded.
Let's go. You be careful, now,
the fox chief told them, digging in her pantry.
Here, take some of this stuff with you.
She gave them food and some medical supplies that Squall stored in his inventory before she would let them leave the house.
Which way to the train station?
Squall asked Rinoa as he looked around.
That way,
she pointed. They started walking. They didn't get more than a few steps before a Galbadian soldier suddenly stepped out from a small space between buildings right in their path. Rinoa took a nervous step back as the seeds grabbed for their weapons.
Bad timing,
Squall said, glaring at him dangerously. He wanted dearly to kill something right now and work off this stress.
No, wait. It's me, sir. It's me.
The soldier flinched back from Squall's expression.
What's?
Rinoa frowned, trying to see his face under his helmet.
I'm happy to see you're okay, sir,
Watts saluted her. He really made a good G-Army soldier. If he wasn't so thin and happy.
What are you doing?
Rinoa asked, looking him over.
Getting out of here, sir. Me and Zone are most wanted in Timber right now, along with you. So we're getting out. I've disguised myself to sneak through. It's the only way since the Galbadian army surrounded the city, sir. Mega bummer,
Selphie frowned.
Not to worry, sir. The train started running again this morning, sir. Temporarily, at least. If you can make it there, you can make it out. Thanks, Watts.
Rinoa smiled at him.
You be careful, okay?
He saluted her.
Of course, sir. I'll lead the Galbadians away from your direction. You just escape. See you, Watts,
Rinoa smiled. She refused to believe this was the last time she was going to speak to him, no matter how final this moment felt. Squall pushed on her shoulder and led her around Watts and away. He wanted to get to the train station as fast as possible and not risk another run-in with any more Galbadians. Watts made a fairly decent Galbadian soldier. He must have stolen the uniform from a legitimate source and he even had the mannerisms down. Squall was honestly impressed. If he weren't so weak and cowardly, he would probably have fit into the spy program at Balam. Zone was not nearly the master of disguise that Watts was. His fake mustache was rather obvious even despite the fact that he had put on a grey wig. He hunched over like an old man, but his skin was still clearly young and supple.
Rinoa, Squall.
He waved at them as they approached the tunnel that would lead down to the second train station. Timber had more than one. Squall really didn't understand their thing with trains.
Zone.
Rinoa beamed at him.
You're trying to get out of here by train, right?
He asked, pointing behind him.
There's only one more train leaving today, and there's no more tickets left. Super duper mega bummer.
Selphie cried.
We'll do whatever it takes to get on that train,
Squall assured him. He had already spent a great deal of time dangling off the side of one. Breaking in would be no problem.
You won't have to do anything too crazy,
Zone laughed, pulling his hand from his pocket.
Looky here. I already got everyone's ticket earlier. That's 3 for you seed people. Here you go, Squall. 1 for Rinoa. And the last one is for me.
He trailed off as he noticed Quistis looking at him with a sweet smile. Not like she was expecting his ticket, more like she was just happy he had given anyone tickets at all. And damn was she a babe. Tall, leggy, and blonde was just his type. And was that a whip? She looked like all of Zone's fantasies come to life in one woman. And he was about to make her break into a train. That was no way to earn a lady's affection. Especially not the kind that bore whips and wanted to punish naughty boys.
Go on, take it,
he said, holding it out to her. Quistis's eyes got wide in surprise.
I can't take that. It's yours. Oh, ouch.
Zone grabbed for his gut. Quistis frowned as he pressed it into her hand, then ran, clutching his stomach in mock pain.
Ow, ouch. My stomach hurts. Ouch. Just get going. The train's leaving soon.
He crouched down low in a tiny corner. Rinoa was smiling at him and Squall was looking at him with a single raised brow. Quistis smiled though as she clutched his ticket, her ticket now, in her hand.
Thank you.
Zone, Rinoa leaned over him with a smile.
We're gonna see each other again, okay? No matter what, you have to survive. We have to liberate Timber together, remember?
He looked over his shoulder and smiled at her gently.
I know. I know. I'll go hide in a bathroom or something. Now get going.
Rinoa touched his shoulder gently as the 5 of them ran past. He smiled at her back.
Hey, Squall.
The leader stopped and turned back to him. Rinoa stopped just a few steps after him. The 2 of them looked back at Zone. And he felt strangely like he was seeing his little sister running off with a guy into the night.
You better take care of her,
he yelled up to him.
If anything happens to her, I'm kicking your ass. And you can consider that an order and a threat.
Rinoa was smiling, her face a little red. Squall nodded at him once before turning back to continue running. He took Zone's princess's arm and pulled her along. Zone sighed, standing up straight. He always had a feeling that Timber just wasn't a place for a girl like Rinoa. However, in the last year, he had really come to care for her. In a way that he didn't care for any other girl. Platonically, and with genuine affection. Seeing her go really kind of hurt.
Hey, you!
Zone jumped and turned to see a group of Galbadian soldiers running at him.
This last train is bound for Dalit, stopping at East Academy Station. This is the last train for today. Now boarding. Let's go, hurry on,
Squall said, pushing his team forward. Zell and Selfie ran in first. Quistis stopped by the train entrance as Rinoa jumped aboard.
You still remember how to get there?
Quistis asked.
I remember. Get on the train.
Squall stepped in ahead of her, not waiting for her to follow.
This train, bound for Dalit, stopping at East Academy Station, will depart shortly. Please make sure all your luggage is stowed properly.
The door shut behind Quistis as they stepped into the common area.
Wheel. Open. Open. Open.
Selfie yelled at the door like it might listen to her.
Just wait out here too. Open up.
Selfie shouted again, hitting her fists against the window. Squall resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Why bother fighting her? He walked over to the access panel and used her ticket to buy her entrance. Selfie laughed in delight as the door slid open.
Thanks,
she grinned at him before running through.
What were you saying, Squall?
Rinoa asked as the door shut behind her. Squall turned back and shrugged.
It was nothing important. Tell me anyway,
she smiled, grabbing her arm.
I want to know.
Was that an order? It didn't sound like one. Whatever. If she was that curious.
I was just going to say that we should wait out here. There's no point going inside. It won't take that long to reach East Academy Station. Are you alright with this plan? Escaping to Galbadia Garden? Yeah, why wouldn't I be?
Squall shook his head.
This is still your mission. I'm still under your command. If you don't want to go to Galbadia Garden, I won't fight you.
Rinoa smiled.
You want to go to Galbadia Garden? Then on to Balam Garden, right? You said take you to somewhere safe. There's nowhere safer than Balam Garden. Then let's follow your plan. Besides, Quistis isn't one of my seeds and she needs to get back to Balam, right? No point in splitting up.
Quistis smiled at her gratefully as Squall nodded, accepting her answer. A long sigh followed by a hollow thud had them looking over to see that Zell had dropped his head against the metal body of the train window. Rinoa stepped up close to Squall, frowning at him.
Is he okay?
She whispered.
He feels bad for what he said in front of the camera. As he should. He should have known better than to be giving out sensitive information like names on air. Even Cypher knew better than that. Shouldn't you comfort him or something though? Leave him alone. He'll talk to us when he's done beating himself up. He needs to learn from this lesson, Rinoa. Let him do so. Don't tell him it's okay, because it's not. Seed is kind of harsh,
Rinoa frowned.
It's not an easy life we choose to lead. But that's the point. We chose this. No one is forced into Seed. Zell decided on this path, he has to learn the rules to walk it. But leave it alone, Rinoa. This is Seed business.
She recoiled like he had struck her. She took a few steps from him, turning away. Squall watched her go and wished she would stop forgiving him for things he did to push her away. It was making it harder and harder to keep pushing. End of chapter.